Picture one silicon wafer on a cleanroom table. Before it becomes an AI model, before it becomes a chatbot logo, before it becomes a subscription button on your phone, almost every serious frontier system has to pass through the same narrow physical gate. The chips, the foundry, the lithography machines, the memory, the packaging, the cloud contracts, the capital, and the people who know how to turn all of that into a training run. The competition is visible at the app layer. The bottlenecks are underneath. The public argument usually starts at the top. ChatGPT versus Claude, Gemini versus Grok. Llama versus everything with a download button and a licensing footnote. From that angle, the market looks lively. Prices move, products change, and researchers leave one lab on Monday and appear at another by Thursday, with the usual Bay Area mystery of whether they have also founded a company in between. But frontier AI is not built at the level where consumers compare apps. It is built at the level where one firm designs the dominant accelerator, one foundry manufactures the leading-edge chips, one lithography supplier prints the patterns, 3 memory companies feed the GPUs, 4 cloud operators buy the capacity, and 5 labs compete to stand on top. Anthropic is not a monopoly. Neither is OpenAI. Neither is Google DeepMind, xAI, or Meta. They compete. They poach each other's senior researchers. They cut each other's prices. A user with a credit card can move from one to another in seconds. In the strict legal sense, the sense that requires a single seller, a sustained ability to set prices above marginal cost, and durable barriers to entry, no AI lab in 2026 meets the test. In antitrust law, the cleaner word is oligopoly, a small number of firms whose actions affect each other. The consumer sees 5 chatbot logos. The supply chain underneath them narrows to 1 chip designer, 1 foundry, 1 lithography supplier, 3 memory companies, 4 cloud buyers, and the same recurring funders. On Friday, the 8th of May, 2026, the venture investor David Sachs argued on his own podcast that, if Anthropic's current trajectory continued, it could become the most powerful monopoly ever created in human history. The other hosts pushed back. They named ChatGPT's falling app share, Gemini's growth, and Grok's traction. The argument carried on because the word was vulnerable to the technical correction and structurally close enough to be uncomfortable. The chips that train frontier models are designed mostly by one company, NVIDIA. Public estimates of NVIDIA's share of frontier AI accelerator revenue cluster between 75 and 90%. Standard Oil at its peak in 1904 controlled about 90% of U.S. oil refining. At that layer, the public estimate is already in Standard Oil territory. The fabrication of those chips happens mostly at one foundry, TSMC, in Taiwan. In the fourth quarter of 2025, TSMC held 70.4% of the revenue across the top 10 foundries in the world. Of the wafers TSMC actually produced, 74% were at the 3 leading-edge nodes, 3 nanometer, 5 nanometer, and 7 nanometer. The chips that matter for AI training are made at those nodes. The public record points overwhelmingly to TSMC, though exact allocation is not public. The machines TSMC uses to print those chips come from one supplier, ASML, in the Netherlands. ASML is the only company in the world that sells commercial extreme ultraviolet lithography machines. In 2025, ASML recognized 48 of them, after 44 the year before. The total commercial production run of leading-edge AI chip fabrication equipment on the planet is measured in the dozens, and it all comes from one industrial estate near Eindhoven. The high-bandwidth memory that pairs with the GPUs is supplied by 3 companies, SK Hynix, Samsung, and Micron. The advanced packaging that joins the GPUs and the memory, a TSMC process called chip-on-wafer-on-substrate, or CoWoS, is also a global bottleneck under TSMC's control. Above the manufacturing layer sit the buyers of those chips at frontier scale: Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, and Oracle. Their combined capital expenditure for 2026 is guided between $660 and $690 billion. Oracle alone is carrying over $100 billion of debt to fund its side of the OpenAI workload. On the chatbots themselves, there are 5 companies that can train at the frontier. OpenAI, headed by Sam Altman, closed a $122 billion funding round on the 31st of March, 2026, at a post-money valuation of $852 billion. That is the largest private funding round in history. Anthropic, headed by Dario and Daniela Mohoday, raised $30 billion at a valuation of $380 billion in February 2026. By the 12th of May, the company was reported in talks to raise between $30 and $50 billion more, at a valuation of up to $950 billion. The valuation doubled in 3 months. Google DeepMind, led by Demis Hassabis, sits inside Alphabet. It has access to all of Google's distribution and its own tensor processing unit chip line, manufactured under a partnership with Broadcom. xAI, headed by Elon Musk, raised $20 billion in January 2026 in a Series E round. The investors included NVIDIA, Cisco, the Qatar Investment Authority, MGX from the United Arab Emirates, and the Saudi state-backed Hynix. Meta, run by Mark Zuckerberg, distributes its Llama line of models openweight and has one of the largest disclosed owned compute buildouts in the world. Those are the 5 American frontier firms. Add DeepSeek, the Chinese frontier lab, as a 6th in a parallel ecosystem. The capital that funds the 5 labs comes mostly from the same handful of names. Microsoft sits behind OpenAI, $13 billion of direct cash investment. By Wired's Oakland trial reporting and Epic AI's hyperscaler capex tracking, Microsoft's total economic exposure to the OpenAI partnership now exceeds $100 billion, counting custom supercomputers, cloud capacity, an exclusive commercial license, Azure revenue, profit share, equity return rights, and post-AGI rights added when OpenAI restructured in 2025. The chief executive of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, testified to all of this under oath in Oakland on the 11th of May. Asked under cross why Elon Musk had never contacted him directly with concerns about the partnership, Nadella answered, "We have each other's phone numbers." NVIDIA, the chip designer, has stated its intention to invest up to $100 billion into OpenAI as part of a partnership to deploy 10 gigawatts of NVIDIA systems. That is $100 billion from a chip company into its largest customer, who will spend that money buying chips back from the chip company. The supplier is financing demand for its own systems. Amazon backs Anthropic with up to $8 billion in cash and Trainium-based infrastructure. Google also backs Anthropic, with multiple gigawatts of TPU capacity through Broadcom and a separate $2 billion investment. Anthropic's chief rival, OpenAI, is backed by Amazon's chief competitor in cloud, Microsoft. The same pattern appears across the smaller labs. Andreessen Horowitz holds stakes across OpenAI, xAI, MISTRAL, and Thinking Machines Lab. The Saudi public investment fund vehicle Hynix invested $3 billion in xAI. MGX from the UAE participates in the Stargate Compute project, alongside OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank. The trial in Oakland made one further fact public in early May. Greg Brockman, the president of OpenAI and one of its co-founders, disclosed under oath that he holds approximately $30 billion in personal OpenAI equity. On cross-examination, Musk's lawyer asked how a nonprofit co-founder had ended up $30 billion richer. Brockman testified the disclosure had been made to a single board member. The people who can lead a frontier AI training run number in the low thousands globally. The leadership pool is small enough that the same names recur across every lab. In 2024, Mira Murati, the chief technology officer of OpenAI, left to found her own company, Thinking Machines Lab. She raised $2 billion at a $12 billion valuation. She hired 42 people, including 5 co-founders. The list of founders included senior researchers from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, and Stanford. By the 14th of May, 2026, Business Insider reported that 13 of those 42 had left. 3 of the 6 co-founders were gone. Their next stops included Meta, OpenAI, and xAI, the same set of firms Murati had hired them out of. On Tuesday, the 12th of May, 2026, on direct examination in a federal courtroom in Oakland, California, Sam Altman, the chief executive of OpenAI, said this under oath. "I do not believe I could get $200 billion into a nonprofit." The sentence matters because it names the capital problem inside the corporate form. The mission that justified OpenAI's original nonprofit structure was to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. The capital required to actually build that mission is, by Altman's sworn estimate, beyond what charitable form can produce. The Oakland trial also played video depositions from former OpenAI board members Helen Toner and Natasha McCauley, and former Chief Technology Officer Mira Murati. In that testimony, Toner said she was used to the board not being informed about things. McCauley said the board had real doubts, that it could trust what the CEO was telling it. Murati described what she saw as a pattern, saying one thing to one person and the opposite to another. On the 23rd of February, 2026, OpenAI rewrote its charter. The phrase that named the company's primary fiduciary duty to humanity is no longer there. The word safely is no longer in the mission statement. No public process announced the change. What does the institutional response to a concentration like this usually look like, and how long does it usually take? Standard Oil, the canonical industrial monopoly, was built between the 1870s and the turn of the 20th century. It was broken up by the United States Supreme Court in 1911. 30 to 40 years passed from peak consolidation to court-ordered remedy. The Bell system, the regulated American telephone monopoly, was assembled under the Kingsbury Commitment in 1913. It was finally divested in 1984, 71 years later. The broadcasting industry, organized around RCA's network of stations and patents in the 1920s, was brought under the Federal Communications Commission by the Communications Act of 1934. 10 to 15 years passed from concentration to permanent regulator. Across these examples, the institutional response arrives after the network has already taught the market how to work. The fast lag is a decade. The slow lag is 7 decades. The Biden-era executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy artificial intelligence was rescinded on the 20th of January, 2025. There is no successor backbone in United States federal law. The European Union AI Act came into force in August 2024. On the 7th of May, 2026, the EU's Council and Parliament reached provisional political agreement on a digital omnibus package to simplify and streamline those rules in the name of competitiveness. The high-risk obligations are being staged into 2027 and 2028. The United States Federal Trade Commission issued a structural report on AI partnerships in January 2025. It identified those same lock-in patterns, but it is not a remedy. Federal Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers is expected to decide any remedy after the advisory jury phase in Musk versus Altman. She is one district judge in Oakland. The American stack is not the only stack. China has built a second concentrated one. DeepSeek released its 4th-generation model on the 24th of April. Huawei is selling Ascend 950 accelerators directly to Alibaba, Tencent, and the rest of the Chinese cloud market. NVIDIA's market share in China, under United States export controls, is effectively 0. Chip designer, Huawei 1. Foundry, SMIC, China's domestic fabricator 1. Cloud operators, Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, and ByteDance, 4 operators. Frontier Model Labs, DeepSeek, Chwen at Alibaba, Honeywell at Tencent, Ernie at Baidu, and Doubo at ByteDance, 5 labs. State coordination is extensive. A federal judge's desk in Oakland, California, late May 2026. On the desk is a trial transcript from Musk versus Altman, a live week of testimony from the 5th through the 13th of May. Underneath the transcript is a copy of the California Nonprofit Public Benefit Corporation Law. Underneath, that is an invoice from Microsoft Azure to OpenAI for cloud compute services rendered. The judge writes the institutional response this summer. Outside the courtroom, the companies described in the testimony keep placing chip orders, signing cloud contracts, raising capital, and hiring from the same narrow pool of people. The next training run begins before the ink on the verdict has dried.
If this changed how you see your next receipt, your next bill, your next upgrade, we did our job. Like and subscribe, we have more to show you.